Welcome to Season 4 of Grieving Common. You're listening to different voices from the Winston Swish youth team.
We're a group of grieving young people who are helping to shape the future of grief support.
We're all different, but we've all got grief in common. If you're aged 13 or over, this podcast is suitable for you.
Winston Swish is a charity that supports children and young people who are bereaved or facing the death of someone important to them. And this podcast is our space to talk honestly about what that feels like.
We'll be sharing our ideas, experiences and conversations that we hope will help you feel less alone. If you'd like to help us keep this going, you can donate at winstonswish.org. Thank you.
In this episode of Grief in Common, we mention grief and death throughout. Welcome back to Grief in Common. I'm Nell. I'm one of the youth ambassadors here at Winston Swish. And today we actually have a very exciting episode, something a little bit new. Today is actually the launch of our Ask Me campaign, which is so beyond exciting because it has been such an amazing project. So like I said, I'm Nell. I've been at Winston Swish for 2 years after my dad died 2 years ago. I think this is a project we've all been so excited about because we're all very passionate about education. This is going to be so fun. I'm joined by two absolutely incredible people that I'm so excited to be here with. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Hi, my name is Abigail. You probably have had me on here before as well. I'm part of the youth team and the Ask Me campaign forum with Nell, and then also the youth advisory forum. I've been at Winston Swish for about 2.5 years after I lost my sister 8.5 years ago. I'm also really excited for all of this and it being the launch day. It's been a long process up until now, so this is so exciting. And then we're also joined by Letizia, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Abigail. So I'm Letizia Perna, and I'm the Deputy CEO and Director of Services here at Winston Swish. And I'm equally as excited as the two of you about today because it's a big day for all of us, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so cool to say, like, it's out today. Like, that is insane. I feel like we've been waiting for this for a while. So excited for everyone to see it and hear it and listen to this, hopefully. I think we'll just do a little bit of explaining about what this is. Like, what is Ask Me? What happened leading up to this? Why we're here? What we want it to do? And what the importance of Ask Me as a general campaign is. The whole youth team, I speak on behalf of the whole youth team, that a large percentage of us came in with a really big motivation of we want to reform education. And that was like a large kind of motivator, I think, behind being part of Winston Swish. And I'd say that especially from my perspective as well. I know that's kind of what I badger a lot of the staff about. So it's so exciting that this is kind of happening now.
To second what Nell said, I think so many of us, even just upon first joining the youth team, education is something that we speak about. There are a fair few good experiences that people have spoken about, but I think the majority is negative. When you have conversations with other people, you see that there are so many gaps in education institutes and amongst the plans, if they have them already, about how bereavement in school is dealt with and what support they can offer. So I think coming together as a forum and across the youth team and sharing everyone's experiences has been really important in basically formulating this campaign and really seeing how far it can go.
Yeah, definitely. I think just for some context, while we're talking about all of this, there is actually like a dedicated Ask Me forum at Winston Swish. So there's a little group of us who kind of have come together and have put forward this, with obviously the help of amazing staff, this campaign and like a bereavement plan for schools. So kind of just helping that conversation and giving them some guidance points as to what is maybe helpful to ask or what is constructive to ask in terms of guiding your own kind of bereavement support in schools. The biggest thing for us was recognising that actually, even though a lot of us have had so many negative experiences, it is a hard conversation to navigate and there's no blueprint. And actually, how do you approach such an emotional and vulnerable topic with someone? And I think that's what the bereavement plan especially was. So making sure that you can put provisions in place for difficult days or difficult subjects or modules within that subject, and just checking in, I think, as like a form of a bit of a contingency plan, to make sure there's that consistency of support as well.
We've touched briefly upon how education support is really important for us as members of the youth team, but we want to know why Winston's Wish decided that you wanted to create this change. So if there's anything you can tell us about that.
Yeah, it's a great question, Abigail. And I think our commitment to this started well before this actually happened, really weirdly. So Winston's Wish has always been a pioneer within bereavement sector. And I think for us, something that happened 4 years ago was really, truly 100 million% committing to putting children and young people at the heart of everything we did. And so the Youth Forum came to exist. And we spent the first 3 years of that experience, and you guys were part of that journey, really listening to you guys. And equally listening to all the children and young people, as well as the parents that we work with on a day-to-day basis, and education kind of coming up and coming up and coming up. And funnily enough, I remember my very first client. Now, I trained a million years ago, but my very first client was a young man who'd lost his dad, who kept being labeled at school as a bad boy with bad behavior and truant and troubled. And nobody had ever bothered to ask what was really behind all of that. And to think that that was about 20 years ago, and what we were hearing in the now was it was still the same. And really interesting, we even see it in some of the referrals that we get, that unfortunately bereaved children are getting labeled as schools as difficult or drop out of school because actually no one's really taken the time to ask them what's going on and how they can truly be supported. And it was one day when Fen, who is our head of youth participation and engagement, who came over to me and said, "Oh my God, we had the most amazing meeting. And it was all about education. And the team have so many ideas and so many things that they want to talk about. And all they kept saying is, why doesn't anybody ask me?" And it was like the light bulb moment where we're like, ask me, that's it. That's what we need to do. Yes, they need to ask. And it started from there. And for us, it was really, really important that about a year ago when we started setting our new strategy, I very much took it from the point of view, we can't have spent 3 years listening and then do nothing. Like, we have to put this into action. And so Ask Me became the very first thing that went in that strategy a year ago that we launched this past April. And the reality is that there's a true belief from our end that actually, children and young people spend so much time at school that it's really important for those teachers and even educational leaders to actually take a really proactive stance around how support for kids is like, what it looks like, and that they don't make the decisions for you guys, right? This is all about making sure that you're part of that journey and that you're actually in the driver's seat and they're there to support you. And all too often we heard about children not wanting to talk about it at school because they didn't feel safe or felt like teachers would listen or say the right thing. Unfortunately, often saying the wrong thing, which, yes, it exists. You can definitely say the wrong thing. Or also we heard from parents saying, unless I bang down that door day in and day out, it just would do nothing. And though there is something out there called the bereavement policy, and interestingly enough, many of the schools I've talked to say, oh, yeah, that document. Oh, yeah, it's sitting somewhere in our desktop. And I say, oh, when was the last time you opened it? Oh, I'm not sure actually if I've ever opened it. And that's just disgraceful, really. We should be doing so much better for you guys and for all the kids that are unfortunately going to be bereaved from this moment forward. And so for us, it was a no-brainer. One, we knew how amazing you guys were, the energy, the enthusiasm, the ideas of the team. And we knew that we could just simply do this together and help you, give you a platform and start a movement together. And it's going to be a great movement. And soon, I know so many people will join us, and so many people have already joined us without even knowing the ins and outs of this. So hats off to you guys, because you've definitely been such a vital part of this journey for us.
Thank you. That is so kind. And thank you that was such a, really nicely kind of captured. It's so incredible, I think, to be part of this. And I think that's so true. I think what was so fun about Ask Me was that, like you said, that initial conversation, I think it's quite rare that just one phrase comes up in almost every sentence that's being said. And it was just like, wait, hold on a second. It's actually that simple. that like autonomy and like that dignity of that choice, I think is really important. And that's kind of what Ask Me encapsulates. And like Abigail was saying earlier, the kind of difference in experiences across the youth team was so interesting because, you know, I was an absolutely massive geek at school. I loved school, still love learning, still am a geek. And so school was so formative for me. It was so incredible in my like development, and it definitely made me who I am today. And that is so privileged of me to say that. School and education has such a capacity, I think, for change and to create, you know, emotionally intelligent young people who are free to talk about those things, because bereavement is so all-encompassing, no matter what age you're at, what situation you're in. And if you're going to school day in and day out, like, and you're not being given that support, you can't be expected to thrive in that environment. Helping people navigate those conversations, I hope, is where the change begins, because that's a difficult step to take. But I think what's so nice about the Ask Me manifesto is, in its entirety, it's quite simple. We are asking people to lead with empathy, treat people how I'd like to be treated, ask people what's going on, and accept that actually what's happening is an incredibly emotional, incredibly vulnerable part of their life. And to treat that with respect, I think, is really important.
We talk often about grief being as unique as your fingerprint. And so the concept of one size fits all, everything's fine, is really actually turning a blind eye to the reality of life, right? And I think for us, there's something even further with that, in that I dare anybody, and that's not just teachers, but anybody, to read the manifesto and go, oh no, I don't want to do that. It is really kind of common sense. But the reality is, you know, we don't live in a society that openly talks about death, dying, and bereavement, right? It's not the coffee shop conversation, the TikTok thing that everyone's doing. It just simply isn't. And so there's a lot of fear, unfortunately, around this topic, and a lot of emotion. You know, there are definitely adults out there who've obviously experienced bereavement, either as children or in their adulthood, who have struggled to even talk about their emotions. And so it all automatically becomes this stigmatized topic that really doesn't need to be, and ends up being something that gives people labels, incorrect labels. And I often think about the fact that actually, and I think Nell and Abigail, you've probably experienced this when you guys were in school. You know, when you're bereaved, your world is turned upside down. You're just trying to function. And when you've got school in the mix, that's an added pressure. And sometimes you just simply don't have the brain space because your emotions are enough as it is, and you're already as overwhelmed. So the reality is that if school doesn't take a proactive step in helping you on those difficult days, those difficult moments, those difficult months, however it may be for you, you're inevitably going to think that, oh, this place is no longer a safe space and I really don't want to be here. And that has a real impact too. You know, you talk about the fact that you love learning, but potentially you might have hated learning. You might have hated being there. You might have felt so isolated from everybody around you, which grief already is isolating enough. But actually, we need to change that and make sure that you continue to thrive and that there's a network that helps you continue to be resilient, because that is what it's about.
Schools tend to, even like colleges as well, even when you're getting more towards like adulthood, they tend to see any behaviour that doesn't follow the rules and follow the norm as bad behaviour. So you could respond to your grief in a way of going quiet and kind of sinking into yourself in lessons, not putting your hand up. And that's seen as bad behaviour. You could be out of school because you can't seem to bring yourself to go in because there's so much going on in your head at home. Bad behaviour. Some children turn it into like, you know, defiance and the anger issues that comes across as in class. And no one takes the time to actually think, okay, why are they acting like this? Especially if it's not the norm for that child to respond like that. You know, like at my school, behaviour points was a massive thing. And it's almost like being penalised for your own emotions that you can't often help. I'm sure that there are so many teachers across schools that have had a bereavement in their childhood. But I was speaking to my dad a couple of weeks ago, and he lost his dad when he was 10. And his mindset of it is, well, I just got on with it. You know, there was no support in place. So that's just how he dealt with it. So to him, it's like, okay, you just, you know, things happen, you get on with it, because he's not known any different. And it's awful to think that adults nowadays were treated like that, or just, you know, not treated in any way at all. So if they're now in the position of a teacher for someone else who comes to them with a situation of grief, they're not necessarily going to know how to respond, because they have had that personal experience of a loss, but not the ways that it can be dealt with empathy. So I think that's a good reason why the bereavement plan and policy that schools will have in place is a really good product for teachers to refer to, because it's come from real voices, real youth voices, people with all different experiences. And it's just like a little, you know, a shoulder to lean on for the staff to know that they can go about it in the right way, and that these cycles don't have to keep going. There can be, you know, there can be good change.
When the first original Ask Me discussions were going on, it was a lot about sort of, you know, how do we want to change the future of education for lots of young people? How do we want no one else to feel this way in the future? And that's obviously an incredible thing to look toward, and to decide what that should look like. But what we sort of came across certainly later on is actually there's a certain extent to which this was actually for us, and this was actually for everyone who had never had that before. And it was, I think, for a lot of us, a sense of closure, really, of what would I have wanted my experience to be like? And what did I want everyone who's been bereaved before me to have an experience of as well? Which is I think so lovely. That kind of group collective idea was about a sense of almost a bit of justice and a bit of kindness in the educational bereavement realm. You know, everyone kind of knows that actually what happened, if it was negative, wasn't okay, and that it should have been changed and there should have been something in place. And I think that's what's hopefully quite amazing about what we've done, is that I do think we're the first people to turn around and go, we're not actually going to have that again. We don't want that to happen to anyone again. That shouldn't be happening. We are being that change that we wanted for so long. I think we've been talking a lot about all of our youth team stories and how we've all put it together. Letizia, Winston's Wish is so youth-led, but why was this in particular important to have the youth team involved?
The reality is, you guys as the kids and young people who've been there, who've walked in those, hallways, been in the midst of those difficult conversations, unfortunately have had to hear the wrong thing. That absolute living experience, which, some of us in the staff team at Winston's Wish may have had. It might have been many, many years ago. So you make the issues current, you make them alive. And we truly believe that your voice is incredibly powerful. And as adults, we are here to support that voice. And that's how really good movements start, right? I've talked about this being a movement. I truly believe this is a grassroots movement that we are trying to take to the nation to create really crucial, essential systems change. So you guys are the reason we're here, one, but two, the strongest voices in this field and across this country. There is a cheesy phrase, children are our future, but it's not that cheesy, because actually, you guys are the ones that are going to make the rules and change the world. And we truly believe that. So for us, it started with you. It was your idea. It was the thing that was clearly most important at the top of your list. And we were simply the conduit to try and make that happen in a most collaborate way. And as you say, now, we are definitely very much, led by your voices in so many ways. And that's not just this campaign, but across Winston's Wish, from services to fundraising to our marketing team. You guys are definitely part of the fiber of this place and will be for a long time.
So when we've got together as a forum, both virtually and in person, we've been collectively working on the manifesto and creating these key points that educators, staff, anyone seeing it really is what they're agreeing to and what they're taking on, almost as a promise, really. And And alongside that, we've been working on the bereavement plan. So the final document that schools will have, and as I was saying earlier, what they will refer to, what this will look like for Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, because different age groups obviously have different cognitive milestones, different emotional levels as such. So it's been really important for us to fine-tune the details and make sure that it really works for everyone, and at the same time doesn't overwhelm the staff that are leading it, just so it's accessible for everyone and something that is taken on. I just wanted to ask you, Letizia, why Winston's Wish thought that a manifesto, bereavement plan, and then the future training is how the campaign will go, and also what these things will look like in practice.
Great question, Abigail. So I guess for us, there's something around a movement needs to come from an idea, a commitment, but commitment's not going to go very far unless there's action, right? So the manifesto is all about getting people to understand the cause, understand the simple solutions, and agree that they will, as you say, promise to do the things we ask, which you guys have alluded to are incredibly simple. And as I say, I dare say anyone go, oh no, I'm not signing that. That's not something I want. And it's something that on every individual, I think, is able to sign. So not just a school, but actually every individual within that school, whether you're a TA, whether you're the head of psychology at the university or wherever, right? Every individual signs that manifesto. And it is a personal commitment. It's a personal commitment about your relationship with your students. But the reality is, I say, is that the commitment's great, but a commitment works when the system itself supports that commitment of all those individuals. So it doesn't help us to have one teacher sign the manifesto when the school actually continues to turn a blind eye and just have a bereavement policy that collects dust, right? So for us, the bereavement plan was the next step up is right. Great. So we've got all these people that want to, and maybe some that aren't so sure because they might be a bit scared as to, oh, how do I do this and how do I do it this well? So how does the system actually have something in place? And the policy concept is out the door. What we want is a living, breathing document that is co-owned between that student that's bereaved at whatever age and that school system. And not something that individual teachers can be involved with, heads, leaders, whoever it is, but it is co-designed and co-created with the students. So bereavement plan, you're absolutely right, Abigail. We have one for early years and K1 because obviously their needs are quite specific. And it's very intrinsic that families are involved in part of that discussion, particularly because the little ones in early years won't have the language to really explain, but actually would be the moms and dads and carers and guardians who will be able to explain what's going on at home and what the repercussions of grief, how that's showing for that young child. And then we have a second one, which is Key Stage 2+, which we believe is going to be applicable across the entire Key Stage 2, 3, 4, 5, and obviously universities and colleges. And what that is in practice is very simple. You know, we talked about Ask Me, and what you guys came up with, which you can talk about better than me, is key topics that you feel are really crucial in asking. And what we're pushing for is compassionate conversations that asks those very questions that together draw a plan as to how you want to be supported in school. You know, let me know if there's a difficult topic that might be a trigger. You know, give me the choice to create a Father's Day card. Give me choice and bring me into the mix when you're thinking about lesson planning or just what's happening in the day. But the only way you're going to achieve that is if you truly have a living, breathing document and a living, breathing document that everyone within that system understands. And this is why training is so crucial. We know, because we've talked to way too many professionals across the entire country, that though they all want to do this and they all believe in this, they're scared. And it sounds crazy to think that adults are scared, but they are, because they've got their own emotions. They don't want to get it wrong. You know, there's a lot of pressure about getting it right. But ultimately, these teachers and these schools want the best for you guys. And so they want to do right by you. But because there is no manual in grief, and there is no manual on how to be a teacher helping a child who's bereaved, we're effectively creating a training to help provide some understanding about grief, which is so incredibly important, especially as grief education is coming within the curriculum. So we need teachers that are understanding of what grief is and what it looks like within children of all ages. And it then also moves into self-care, because that's really important for teachers as well, right? They're taking on a lot. How do they manage themselves? But also, how do we give them the absolute best tools to have that compassionate conversation? What is it that they need to do? And the most important thing is, how do they lead it in a proactive way so that they don't wait for that bereaved student to hit crisis point, but actually these conversations are being had well before. And we believe these conversations are necessary even when we know that a child is about to be bereaved. So this isn't just a conversation that happens after the fact, but actually it's a journey. And every step of the journey is so important. So the training is really vital. Today, what's exciting is the Manifesto is out, the Bereavement Plan is out, and the Implementer's Guide is out. So it's a free resource that effectively says, hey, school, you feel that you've got the confidence and the knowledge to implement the plan and get it moving. Here you go. This is a little how-to guide. And in a few months, for the schools that feel like, oh, this is a bit complex and maybe we need a bit of support, they can come back to Winston's Wish and there will be training available to them to be able to help embed this within the system. And what we're going to be working on is creating what we call the Ask Me School badge or the Ask Me College badge, which is going to be a wonderful logo that schools can display on their website and be really proud about, because they are taking a stand towards really supporting their bereaved children and young people. And this is not going to be an award that it's like, oh yeah, tick the box, done. But actually this is something that, again, living and breathing, we want to see evidence that schools are keeping those amazing standards. And yeah, it's incredibly exciting. And what's more exciting is that today we announced that we have 10 schools already across the country who are already on their way to implement the bereavement plan, because they believe that this is the movement that needs to be supported nationally, which is amazing.
That is so exciting to hear. Yeah, I think there were a couple of really interesting points that you made there that I think encapsulate quite well what we were trying to do. Ask Me isn't necessarily trying to bring up all of these difficult conversations when obviously people don't want to have them. It is ultimately about that choice. There are certain situations in which, like you said, a lot of people on the forum have said or shared that that choice was taken away from them. Everyone grieves differently. Like we said, there is no kind of blueprint on how to grieve. And so certain days are difficult for people and certain days just aren't. And that isn't necessarily some binding thing of saying, I might find this difficult. It's just going, just so you're aware, this might be something that I want to talk about, but I also probably won't want to talk about it, and that's okay. It's just allowing, I guess, more professionals to be aware of what's going on, and that as kind of creating more of a safe space was quite important to us. And kind of similarly moving on from that, in the first kind of discussions we were having about this was a lot about, well, currently, what are the barriers? Why hasn't this happened? Because obviously none of us could believe that it hasn't before. But so, okay, why is that the case? And we were conscious of overwhelming and overstretching teachers. And we didn't want this to be something that people could be like, oh, I don't have the time to commit to that. So many teachers and professionals have wanted to have these conversations, but they haven't known how. And so what we've said is, okay, well, maybe you could ask this question, or you could talk about this specific lesson that they're not attending. And kind of just using our experiences to guide that, I suppose, in a way that hopefully is helpful and, like you said, not that scary, because all that we were kind of seeing and hearing was actually the negativity kind of happened when no one did anything. And so if we can make those conversations easier for everyone, then that's kind of what we should be doing. And like you said, I completely agree. It's a movement, and it has the capacity, I think, to create some pretty real and pretty amazing change. So yeah, what are your hopes, I suppose, for Ask Me? Where do you want this to go?
Well, I think the one bit that I think unifies us all, and that's Winston's Wish staff team and you guys within the youth team, is we dream big, right? So where we want it to go is we want every single school, early years, university, primary, secondary, all of that, to have a bereavement plan. We want each school to be an Ask Me school. We want every child and young person in the UK to have a voice and for schools to be a place of support and understanding and open communication. Ultimately, this is what it is. And now, as you were speaking, I was thinking lots about the movement that this country has had around mental health. Mental health used to be something nobody spoke about. And now actually schools are really proactive in their pastoral care and the way they talk about mental health, in the way they signpost children to mental health services. The reality of the situation of bereavement is bereavement impacts one's mental well-being. And so it isn't something special that sits on some other, spectrum. It is all part of well-being. And actually, we need to put it on the table. And so the dream is that a bit like the mental health movement, the bereavement movement will see a world and schools and colleges where children and young people feel able to talk about it with their teachers, with their peers, and that it isn't something that actually creates isolation, but actually fosters compassionate communities and resilience. So the dream is that maybe really, really soon, because that's how we dream, the Department of Education will come out and say, hey, do you know what? This is important and this is essential. And it should be a right of every bereaved child to expect this from their school and from their educators. And that's a pretty good dream to have, I think. What we've heard from so many children and young people is the difficulty they faced in transitioning from, say, primary to secondary or secondary into sixth form into college or university. So again, the bereavement plan, in our view, is a document that goes with you. But the reality is, if we think specifically about things like secondary school and sixth forms and university and colleges, you guys are customers in that essence because you get to choose where you go. And isn't it more lucrative to think, hey, if I go to this university, they understand my experience and they're going to proactively support me, as opposed to this university who has still their head dug down deep in the sand. So actually, there is also something about the impact of not just your experience there, but also the message you send out by saying, hey, we're an Ask Me school. And it's not just about the children and young people, but actually it's a huge message for their entire community.
We've spoken a lot in meetings about how this plan can be like a transitioning plan as well, how it's important to review it, because my sister passed away 8.5 years ago, and it took me 6 of those years to talk about it and to want to. And I was in secondary school at the time, but these moments where it hits still happening when I was in university. And that's such a long time between that. And I think that's why it's important for the plan to progress with you and also grow with you as well, because your triggers change, your emotions towards certain conversations will change.
It's exactly that, right? You guys thought about the very concept of needing to be living, breathing. And so in some sense, the plan and everything that follows with it, which is the training and the award, is all about making sure that it's not a tick box exercise. And that was the problem with the bereavement policy. The question was, does the school have a bereavement policy? Tick, yes. Does it do anything with, well, I don't know. I don't even know where it is. That's the problem, right? So now the question is, does the school have bereavement plans? Yes. Show us. Show us. And show us that actually you're doing them with children. Show us the evidence that the document is something that's revisited, as you say, Abigail, because you're right. Things change. Things change in an academic year. Things change on a day-to-day. And that's all it's about, is saying to folks, grief is a journey. And with it, there are conversations that need to be had across that journey. So don't stop talking. Don't shut the door. Give me the ability to talk about it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's also so interesting about what you were saying earlier about how actually with that mental health movement, there is, the government is starting to recognise that grief and bereavement should be conversations in schools. And that's absolutely incredible. That's a new guideline set for schools about having conversations about bereavement. From that, you can't expect schools to be having these emotional conversations and getting them right when they don't know how to have these conversations. What you're doing really there is asking them to have difficult conversations with no structural guidelines, no one to say, actually, well, how do I do that? So many members of staff recognise that it's important. They want to do it. But even I would have no idea how to go into a conversation like that. Having experienced it myself, like I wouldn't know because like Abigail said, the boundaries is so different. And I think what's important is actually we've sat down and we've gone, okay, well, how can we help these people do this? We're just giving you a helping hand. And I think you have safer and more sustainable conversations in this way. You know, you create a safe space for people, which is so important because, you know, for so many young people, they go into a new educational setting and you have to sit down and explain what happened again. And that is just awful. That should not be happening. You know, there's so many things that you go into a school and they know about you already. Like when I went to university, they knew so much about me, but where would that have come up? Like it just doesn't, which is potentially a slightly separate conversation, but this is what Ask Me does so well, I think. It stops that kind of bringing up of difficult periods and difficult emotions and does that communication for you in a way that's, I hope, fairly seamless, just to avoid that emotional upheaval, really, because that's really hard to have that conversation again, no matter how many years later it is. You know, that shouldn't be something that people are being forced to do.
Ask Me couldn't come at a better time. I mean, it's a bit late, but we're finally here, right? And it is a great time because you're absolutely right. The government from 26 is saying, hey, schools, you got to teach about grief and bereavement. But the reality is you also need to acknowledge that there are children sitting in those classrooms that are actually having those very experiences in that very moment or have had it as part of their history and their lives. And so there is something really important about making sure that actually the reality that's happening in the classroom is understood, validated, and held before anything lands in that curriculum, right? And actually, when it comes in the curriculum, it's the next step. It's like, how does the community, how do the students support each other? So yeah, the timing is perfect in a way for schools because they've got quite a hard job coming in 26. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And even now, like the thought of being sat in a classroom and being talked to about bereavement before Ask Me makes me feel a bit nervous because it's like that would be a hard place to be in. And I think what's also beautiful about Ask Me is, you know, it might be that in your bereavement plan you don't want to be in that lesson, and that's okay. That's part of it. Is the fact of just signposting to staff, this is important to me, and being able to adapt that, which I think is so exciting and makes me feel less nervous about those conversations, which is exactly what we wanted to do, really.
One thing that I just want to mention, because today is the launch event, as we said, the launch of just all of what we've been working on, I think it's really important to reiterate, like what Letizia, you said about a living, breathing document. It's not just, as I put it, a virtual voice of reason. We are stood there like saying to these people, this is what needs to be done, this is the change that needs to happen, and these situations have affected a person. It's not just a thought or an image in your head or, you know, the voice of a podcast. We are human, we do have emotions, we do have these experiences, and yeah, it's just, I think it's a really important thing to show up physically and for everyone else to be there for it too.
And also to celebrate, like what I think we've all done is like so cool. And I think it's also important with stuff like this to go, actually, you know, we have started this movement and that's really amazing.
Join the movement. And remember that actually signing the manifesto is your own personal commitment, but also you who are signing that manifesto out there, and hopefully you're doing that as we're talking, you also have the power to influence. So if you're a student at a school, go knock on doors, go open your teacher's eyes to the importance of this. And if you're a school teacher, go speak to heads, go get the system to be changed, because actually a movement is just as powerful by those who sign it and join it.
I just want to say thank you to everyone who's watched and listened to this episode, and a massive thank you to Nell and Letizia. This is going to be such an important message to get out there, and I hope it resonates with a lot of other people as well. Go to winstonswish.org/askme to sign the manifesto and help us make the change. For support, resources, or to donate and help us keep creating, visit our website. Thanks for listening to Grieving Common.